All right. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for the intro. Welcome, everyone. Suzanne and I are honored to be part of the first webinar of 2023 for SLOAT. And as always, thank you to SLOAT for hosting, always providing awesome, interesting programs, which is really great. Today, we're going to talk for about an hour, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So feel free to add your questions to the Q&A. The chat is also possible, but it's a little bit easier for us if you enter into the Q&A if you can. And what we're going to learn, we're going to talk about the benefits of rain retention for our gardens and the environment, what systems we can use for rain collection, and kind of an overview on what to consider when setting that up. We'll talk about rain gardens, why and how to install them, and talking about pervious surfaces as well. First, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Dan gave a little intro, but I'll share a little bit more about the Our Water, Our World program. Our Water, Our World is a clean water program with the goal of reducing pesticide pollutants that are toxic to our waterways. It's a partnership between water agencies and retailers like SLOAT, designed to bring awareness between pesticides and water quality and provide pest problem-solving education. You can find Our Water, Our World materials in over 200 hardware stores and nurseries in over 23 counties in California, and we are expanding monthly, it feels like. In most stores, what you'll find is a rack of information sheets, like the picture on the right. Those fact sheets talk about common pest problems and how to have healthy gardens, healthy roses. And you also might see a poster with QR codes, so you can just scan that code and get it right on your phone, get that information on your phone. And then also many stores have these blue tags like you see on the bottom there. Those are going to highlight the eco-friendly products on the shelf to make it a little bit easier for you. And then, of course, we have our website, ourwaterourworld.org, where you'll find all of the fact sheets and more information about what retailers we partner with, and more information about water quality. So as I mentioned, Our Water, Our World is a program designed to draw the connection between pollutants and water quality. When we do things in our yards, neighborhoods, or anywhere out in the world, like spraying pesticides, washing our cars, walking our dogs, we are potentially creating pollutants, excuse me. When rain or irrigation flows over that surface, those pollutants can then enter the waterways through runoff. If you live in the Bay Area, which probably most of us do, you live in the San Francisco Bay watershed. Watersheds are areas of land that drain to a waterway. They can be quite large, like the San Francisco Bay watershed, or they can be much smaller that lead to creeks and rivers. The San Francisco Bay watershed is massive. Half of all the water that falls on California, either in rain or snow, makes its way through this watershed and eventually draining to the San Francisco Bay. And on its way there, it takes with it any pollutants that got into our waterways. So that's a large area, a lot of potential pollutants. And as I mentioned, we also live in smaller watersheds, areas that drain to smaller creeks. And even our yards are their own watershed, with water from your irrigation or rain running over your property, draining to maybe a creek, but more likely a storm drain. So we really want to be aware of any runoff or pollutants that we create in our yards and our environment, and the urban runoff that can be brought into those waterways. And you might be thinking, we had a ton of rain this last week or two. Maybe the drought's over. Unfortunately, it's not. We have gotten a significant amount of rain. So the good news is that as of January 3rd, there's no part of the state that is considered in exceptional drought, which is a big deal. It's the first time in probably over a year. But the whole state is still abnormally dry. 98% of the state is in severe drought, and almost a third is in extreme drought still. The drought is actually a little bit worse than it was at this time last year, if you can believe it. Additionally, most of the reservoir levels across the state are still below historical averages for this time of year. Because the state has been so dry for years, we have to take into consider soil moisture. So there's a lot of precipitation falling, snow and rain falling, but it's all falling basically onto a dry sponge. The soil is just a dry sponge at this point. So that sponge, the soil, needs to rehydrate first before there's going to be significant flow into streams, rivers, and reservoirs. Normally the most precipitation that we get is in January and February. So we have some time to see what will happen. Remember last year, there was, almost completely dry January and February, which really contributed to the drought. So, and on another note, what we are experiencing this last week and this week is unfortunately probably the new normal. Long periods of dry, sometimes warmer winter temperatures. It was quite warm on Christmas, if you noticed. Then followed by flashy events where a significant amount of rain falls all at once, and then probably back to dry eventually. So again, last year there were some really big rainstorms in October and December, but then we had an almost completely dry January and February. And again, also what we saw last week is our infrastructure is not set up for these intense rain events. There was flooding, sewers were backing up, reservoir spillways were opened. So what we're going to talk about today is how we can help alleviate the pressure on infrastructure from these massive rain events by retaining water on our properties and reducing flooding and runoff.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you, Dan. So during these times of drought and periods of extreme heat that we've been experiencing, especially through this last summer, very hot, it's challenging to keep our gardens happy. So Charlotte and I prepared this program and are going to provide you with an introduction to share with you how retaining the rain is the solution. When we can hold on to that rainwater, this assists with our goal to grow resilient gardens in our California summer dry climate. There are many benefits. So keeping rainwater on site instead of letting it run off into the storm drains not only prevents pollution from getting into our creeks, our wetlands, the bay, the ocean, but it also benefits our home and gardens, preventing flooding, preventing runoff and pollutants that can get swept away with that runoff. Holding on to rainwater replenishes the water in our soil, recharges our garden soil deeper down. When we can capture rainwater, we can reduce the need for using municipal water to irrigate our landscapes, which is especially important. So in today's webinar, we will cover some simple practices for retaining the rain. We won't have time for detailed instructions, but we'll share helpful resources with you so you can learn more. And we will also have ample time for questions at the end. So let's compare what happens. Sorry, Charlotte. So let's compare what happens when the rain in a vegetative area, what it looks like compared to an urban area. In a natural area, about 50% of that rainwater is able to soak into the soil, whereas in developed urban areas, it's only approximately 15%. How deeply that water can absorb into the ground is also really important. So shallow infiltration, which is when water is just absorbing into the top surface of the soil, it's able to recharge the plant roots and recharge creeks. In our natural areas, the vegetative areas, we're going to get about 25% of that shallow infiltration, with the remaining 25% going deeper to recharge the aquifers and deeper groundwater. Whereas in urban areas, what we see is there's less pervious surfaces, more impervious surfaces. So more of that rainwater is running off instead of soaking in the soil. The illustration here shows that about 55% of the rainwater will be runoff. So what happens with that 55% of rainwater that becomes runoff? It goes to the storm drain. Along the way to that storm drain, it picks up pollutants from the streets and sidewalks, such as pesticides, litter, motor oil, and other pollutants. And those pollutants end up in our creeks, our wetlands, our bay, the ocean, because there's no treatment. They're not going through a filtration system along the way. And when the storm drains are blocked by leaves or litter, or when we have significant downpours that overwhelm the storm drain systems, we see flooding. And we've been seeing a lot of flooding. So even if the rainwater stays on our property, it can cause problems. Water is a powerful force that can displace soil and cause foundation and structural damage. So we're going to look at how we can retain the rain. How to keep rainwater on site is really the goal. We want to hold on to it. We want to keep rainwater on our properties. We want to do it right. And there's many options for that. So let's dive in. Charlotte, take it away.
All right. So the first way to focus on reducing runoff, and if you've attended any of our webinars before, you know that soil is my favorite subject, so I'm here to talk about that, but helping your soil absorb and retain more water. When soil has high infiltration and retention rates, there will be less pooling and flooding on site and more water available to your plants for longer periods of time. The two best ways to do this are by using compost and mulch. Compost turns your soil into a sponge. So amending your soil with just 5% of compost quadruples the soil's water holding capacity. Covering your soil with a 2 to 3 inch layer of organic mulch like wood chips or bark will significantly reduce the water evaporation rate, and it helps water infiltrate easier. It locks in moisture, it feeds the soil as it breaks down, and it insulates the soil from when it's cold out and when it's very hot out. It keeps temperatures regulated. And mulch will reduce erosion, really holds the soil in place. So in these big rain events, there's going to be less soil moving where it shouldn't be. We like to call compost and mulch our drought insurance because it really, really will help the soil absorb and retain moisture throughout the drier summer. If you want more information on building healthy soil and water-wise gardening, I recommend that you look through SLOT's past webinars available on their website. We have done several webinars on those subjects. We're not going to talk much more about that here, though. We'll talk more about retaining the rain. And I will quickly plug, Dan mentioned, I'm going to teach a webinar at the end of the month on compost and how you can start composting at home. So if this is a subject that interests you, check that out. The next way we'll talk about retaining water on site is with rain catchment systems. Catchment systems can be large or small, high tech or very simple, and they can be used for different purposes. Some are going to capture valuable rain runoff from your roof that you can release over the course of the winter to keep your soil hydrated and spongy. And some systems are meant as storage containers for use during the drier months. Benefits of catching rain in a system on site are, keeping relatively clean water out of the sewer system. Water is pretty useless to us once it enters the sewer system. So if we keep it on site, it's going to be more useful. It reduces energy and chemicals that are used to treat water, wastewater at treatment plants. It reduces the volume and peak flows during heavy rains that will flood our system. And it reduces the use of potable water that could be much better used in our home for drinking and cooking. And we're not using potable water for applications like just watering our landscape. It's not necessary. Some catchment systems can be quite large, like these tanks, which are typically 500 gallons or more. The main purpose of these larger systems is to store water that you'll then use throughout the drier months on your landscape. And these larger tanks can be 1,000, 2,000 gallons as well. These larger systems they come in different shapes, but they can be narrow to fit along a fence line or the side of a house, or even under a deck. And then tanks can even be stored below ground if you're able to. Then there are smaller rain barrels that we see a lot. These are typically 50 to 60 gallon sized. These are going to be great for storing water, but they're not really meant for long-term storage. They're really good for catching what you can during a storm and then releasing it over the next few weeks as, say, if there's a dry period, you want to just keep your soil hydrated. So it's just called hold and release. So catch what you can and then release it throughout the next period of time. Because they fill up quite quickly, and they're not going to they don't really store well. The water doesn't store well in a small container because it can grow mildew and algae. So really it's meant to be released back into the soil pretty quickly and not stored for long periods of time. And then I just wanted to share an example of a very simple system. This is my system. I don't have an external gutter in my building, so I can't use roof runoff. But when I know that it's going to rain, I put as many buckets and containers that I have out on my deck, and whatever rain or water is captured, I fill that black trash bin with it. That bin does have a spigot as well. And I use that water, to water my indoor plants, water containers, water seedlings, and it can be used throughout the winter and summer, well, part of the summer. Some options, depending on your space, you can do multiple barrels linked together or daisy chained together. So rain will fall into one of them, that first one from a downspout. And then the spigots at the bottom will move the water to the next barrel as needed. This is a great way, an economical way to start small and then add tanks as your needs change and expand. And it's a great way to kind of understand how much water you can collect. So you'll fill one barrel real quick. You're like, okay, I can get a couple more. So this is a great way to start small and then expand as you go. Some things to consider when you are planning a catchment system. Where are you going to put it? So where are the downspouts of your house is going to be the first thing. If you want to catch rainwater, I don't have, as I mentioned, I have a simple bucket system because I don't have access to downspouts, but generally downspouts or gutters will be necessary for a robust catchment system. Note that if you live in San Francisco and your downspout connects directly to the sewer system, you will need a permit to divert water into a catchment system. And there is a fee for that as well. The other thing that's important is that your landscaped area is going to be close to where you want to release the water. As in most cases, we'll want this water to irrigate our gardens. And I will remind everyone that this water that we're catching is not for indoor use, and it's not going to be potable water or reused as drinking water. This is not going to be safe for that. Consider if if the site for your catchment system is uphill or downhill from where your garden is going to be. It's best if you can use gravity to move the water from your catchment system down to your landscape. You can always raise up the barrels as well to create that slope. And then lastly, is a permit required? Look for your local agencies for information on permit requirements. I know that in San Francisco, permits and certain contractors are required for systems for 5,000 gallons or more. You're going to want to install the system on a flat, shady area. You'll need a space to direct any overflow to a drain, a rain garden, or some area of the property that can handle that extra flow. It's going to have to, that overflow pipe will have to be directed away from the home, the cistern, and not into neighboring properties or public rights of way. You'll also need to secure the cisterns for safety. You can strap them to a wall with metal straps. And I know there are code requirements in certain areas for this as well. You might need to also apply rainwater safety labels that will comply with regulations. Some require a sticker that says, non-potable water. Some other things to consider when choosing the size of your system. First, think about your water needs. Do you have a small container garden or a large landscape? So how much water are you going to use? Do you maybe want to use some of that water for washing your car or flushing your toilet? Those are all things to consider, how much water you'll actually use. Next, what size can you accommodate? How much space do you have? This is probably the most determining factor in deciding what system you want. Also consider how much roof runoff you can capture. On the next slide, I'll give you an equation to figure that out. But remember, your entire roof may not be draining to the gutter that you're going to collect from. So it might just be a section of your roof that collects the runoff. And of course, how much rain is anticipated. As we know, that's really hard to estimate in California, but it is something to think about. Another important consideration, especially if you have larger tanks, is that you have a level and firm surface for these above ground barrels. If you consider a 50 or 60 gallon barrel, it does get, even though it's smaller, it still can get up to 450 pounds when full. So it will require a sturdy foundation, a stable foundation made of barrels, flagstones, cinder blocks, or a level gravel bed will work for that. And then if you have something larger, you may want to consider a concrete foundation or slab, and then be able to secure them to a wall or some sort of surface. And so again, what size of your rain barrel is needed? You can, so to give you an idea, 1 inch of rainwater over 100 square foot surface will fill 60 gallons of water. So that's just one rain barrel that you see pictured in this picture. So that's a lot of rain. That's just 1 inch of rain over a small 100 square foot area. Most roofs are bigger than that. So that's something to consider. And then, so thinking about how much water we anticipate, we have average rainfall totals here, somewhere in the, 20 inches or so, more or less across the Bay Area. Last year, Oakland only got an average of 8 inches of rain, but even just 8 inches of rain would have filled up 8 barrels. Or well, on a 100 square foot roof. So that even though it's only a small amount of rain, it can fill up a lot. So then more site requirements to think about. We do need a place to put our overflow. Those, some barrels, especially the smaller ones, will overflow in a big storm. You want to be able to release that water that can't fit into the cistern. And you'll want to have an area where it can absorb flowing into your landscape, or somewhere where it doesn't flood your foundation or cause damage. In this picture, you'll see the wide overflow pipe. When the barrel gets full, the overflow water gets diverted into the backyard through a perforated drain pipe. And you would just want to make sure that it's not going to flood a neighbor's yard, your house foundation, anything like that. And you do want to make sure that this overflow pipe is covered with a screen on the end. You don't want critters, crawling up the end of it. So we're not going to go into the details of how to design or install a system, but we'll have lots of resources for you on that. For these smaller barrels or containers, you can get kits. I know Urban Farmer Store in San Francisco and Contra Costa do have kits that are fairly inexpensive and easy to install yourself. They come with diverters, overflow pipes, spigots. All you'll need is the barrel or a garbage bin, something like that. I do know that the Urban Farmer Store has one that comes with like a drill bit as well, so you can drill into the gutter. And for larger catchment systems, it is best to hire a professional. Consider hiring a professional for that. So a quick example of design and installation. You can see the roof from above. This is the Garden for the Environment in San Francisco. They have a small little greenhouse, but they can still collect a significant amount of water from that very tiny roof. So it's about it's a 250 square foot roof. So we're going to use our equation. 1 inch of rain over 100 square feet equals 60 gallons, but our roof is 250 square feet. Times 60 gallons, that's 150 gallons. So 1 inch of rain on that tiny little greenhouse will fill 3 of those buckets all connected together. A couple more considerations. You do want to install a first flush device. That's what it's called. And you can buy these devices. They're already made. You can buy them as is. If there hasn't been any rain recently, your roof is going to have a lot of debris, bird poop, leaves, dirt on it. So even though you're not collecting the water for drinking water, you don't want that stuff in your system. So it's important to install what's called a first flush device. This device diverts that first few gallons of rainwater that comes over the soil surface into a separate pipe. Then as it fills, a ball floats up, and then we'll plug the pipe, the entryway to that pipe once it's full, and then the water will be diverted to the rest of the tank. The size of the first flush device is going to depend on how large your roof area is. So just in this illustration, the first flush device is that pipe that goes down on the left. And you can see the inside of it, there's that ball that floats up. Once the first flush device is full, it's going to drain really slowly over time in a separate area just onto the ground. And then you can there's going to be an opening where you can clear out the debris and anything that's caught in it. Another very important aspect is to keep mosquitoes, critters, and debris out of your barrels. For larger barrels, you can use a screen like pictured on the left. It does catch dirt, so you're going to want to once a year clean that out before the rainy season. It will also keep mosquitoes, birds, and other critters out of there. And then for the simpler DIY or smaller barrel systems, you can use a mesh that is secured over the top, just like the picture on the right. And you want to make sure that your overflow pipe has a little screen on it so nothing can crawl up it. And then you do probably want to shake out your overflow pipe occasionally to reduce any pooling that can attract mosquitoes. And then just a quick note on how to access your water once you've filled your container. As I mentioned before, it's easiest if your system is uphill or raised above grade of your landscaped area so that you can just use gravity to let the water flow into a watering can or directly into the landscape with a hose. For larger systems, you can consider a small motorized pump that's going to help move the water faster. And if you want to hook up your cistern to irrigation, it is possible, but I would talk to those folks at the Urban Farmers Store. They're experts in rain barrel systems and irrigation. And then also, as you're considering a system, you do want to look to your local water agency for rebates. I know that SFPUC does have a rebate program for rain harvesting, and other counties do as well. So check to your water agencies. A lot of water agencies also offer rebates for other water saving strategies like lawn removal or conversion, laundry to landscape, and then changing to more efficient irrigation options.
Thank you, Charlotte. We got a lot of questions that came through. Most of the questions were just addressing the, resources and how do we, set up these rain barrels. We'd like you to really ask the folks at the Urban Farmer Store. They are amazing. They've been my go-to for, over 20 years. They are in Mill Valley and Marin County, Richmond and Contra Costa County, and out in the avenues in San Francisco. So reach out to them. They are certainly not the only ones, but they will have resources for you, and you can recommend contractors and other folks that can install these systems. I just also wanted to share that when the systems are not set up properly, a lot of times when we're installing smaller rain barrels, the DIY systems, if they're not done correctly, then there can be more algae and more bacteria buildup. There is naturally occurring algae and bacteria that is going to bloom in these rainwater catchment systems. This is nothing to be afraid of. This is not water we're going to be drinking. This is water intended to be used as a source to water our gardens, or possibly wash our car or flush the toilet, as Charlotte mentioned before. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things that came up. All right, so now I'm very excited to talk about rain gardens. These are my most, I don't know, I get very excited about them. I love building them. I love moving water around my property and seeing how water moves on the property and how I can adjust it and tweak it and, make things go in other areas. So a rain garden is a landscape area designed to receive the rainwater that is going to come from a roof or over a sidewalk, patios, other paved or impervious surfaces, or a rain barrel overflow. And it's going to help that water absorb into our garden. This rain garden or rain gardens are designed to receive that overflow from the rain barrel and other areas where rainwater might be flowing off your property and into the storm drain. So we want to see how is the water flowing or moving across our properties. Rain garden allows that water to stay on site instead of running into the storm drain. The goal of the rain garden is to slow that water, spread that water over the surface, and allow that water to sink in slowly. A rain garden is a low impact solution that provides many benefits. So rain gardens are beautiful, relatively easy to install, relatively inexpensive, gives us a great opportunity to buy more plants. They support our pollinators, our beneficial insects, and they moderate temperatures and will assist with carbon sequestration. So many benefits. In this illustration, we see the rain garden is set 10 feet from the home to receive the water from the overflow from the rain barrel. Rain garden is just like a regular garden bed, but what makes it unique is that it has a slight depression. It is just ever so slightly lower than the surface or the grade of the property. So imagine instead of a raised garden berm or mound, it's in reverse. It's a shallow basin that collects rainwater runoff. This can be lined with rocks, especially where the water is going to be coming in, entering that rain garden. We want to maybe just place some rocks in that area so it can prevent erosion. Oftentimes, rock or gravel lined swales are designed to channel that water from where it originates, such as the downspout or the rainwater tank overflow, to direct that water to the rain garden so that water can be absorbed. Again, the idea is to slow that water flow, to spread that water out, and to allow that water to sink in. Rain gardens help. No, that's okay. Thanks, Charlotte. Rain gardens help to restore the natural balance in our landscape by holding back and soaking in extra rainwater runoff. Rain gardens' purpose is to hold that water that's diverted so that the water can slow the flow and sink in. This is kind of the mantra, okay? So much of this water is used by the plants. So here we go. This is the benefit. Let the plants have the water. If there's too much water, that extra water is just going to spill over and flow into those other areas that it would have before that rain garden was installed. Rain gardens should drain within 12 to 24 hours. And definitely that water shouldn't be in that rain garden for longer than 3 days. We want to prevent mosquitoes and other problems that can occur with long-standing pooling water. There's many ways to incorporate rain gardens into our landscapes. They're feasible for most properties, large or small, and your plants reap the rewards. So it can be as simple as diverting that rainwater from the gutter downspout into an area that we've created. So rocks at the opening of the downspout or the downspout extension help direct and slow the flow of the water. So this is a kind of an example of that water getting directed to our shallow rain garden. Rain gardens can be any shape. You just want to locate that garden anywhere where there's a path of flowing water. And an area where there's soil that can absorb that water and allow that water to soak in. Rain gardens can be placed in close proximity to a walkway or driveway, directing that water away from those surfaces. The rain garden in this picture may technically be considered a swale, but which is really just an area that's redirecting the flow of water within the landscape. But just like a rain garden, swales receive water runoff, redirecting it, slowing it, and spreading it and sinking it in. It's a good idea to include rocks at the flow, as I've mentioned before, because those will definitely help catch any sediment and reduce erosion. It may not be easy to see in this picture, but all of the rain gardens and anything that is rain garden similar like a swale, is always going to be moving. The grade is going to be slightly sloped away from those surfaces so that the water can get moved away and into the soil. We actually see rain gardens all around us nowadays. These are really popular. These are just some examples of rain gardens in urban environments in all 3 counties, San Francisco, Contra Costa, and Marin. This is the process of capturing that stormwater in these curb cutouts so that the stormwater can flow into the garden areas rather than into the storm drain. By integrating these bioretention gardens, contaminants and sediments are removed from stormwater runoff by filtering through the planted areas. It's really cool. I get so inspired by this. All right, a good site, a good location is going to be at least 10 feet from a home or other structures, and 3 feet from a sidewalk or 5 feet from a property line. So you always want to grade that landscape, as I've shared, ever so slightly away from the structure, the house, the walkway, so that the water can flow away from those structures. This might seem really obvious, but we can't, contouring land is not always so easy. So we just always need to measure and measure the grade and so forth, and adjust accordingly. Rain gardens are relatively flat. They are not going to be deep as a pond or bowl. We really are we're not creating a pond at all, actually. We're just creating something that has a very subtle indentation that's going to be able to capture the water. They're typically very flat and wide and shallow. When you create your rain garden in an area where you want to create your rain garden in an area where that soil is going to allow water to drain. We really want that water to sink in. We can check to see how this absorption rate is by simply digging a hole. I like to dig a hole that's about the size of a gallon container, and then I fill that up with that water. That's about a gallon of water. And then I clock and see how fast that water is actually going to drain. If it drains less than 24 hours, that's a perfect location. Some of us get a little nervous because we have clay in our soil. Clay-like soil around our gardens, but that's not something that's going to be too much of a concern with these concepts. Now, how large should the rain garden be? A general recommendation for a rain garden is going to be approximately 4% of the contributing impervious surface area. Okay, so your soil type will definitely affect how the rain garden should be sized. As I shared, if you've got poorer draining clay-like soil, well, we're just going to make that rain garden wider. We're going to have it go over a broader surface, okay? As I mentioned earlier, these are going to be shallow. They're just going to be about 6 inches deep. If your soil is more clay-like, it's going to be maybe a little bit more shallower, maybe 3 to 5 inches, but then broader. Next, we want to consider how much water we are able to capture from the roof or from the overflow of a barrel. The minimum size of a rain garden is going to be 4% of that square footage of the roof. So in our example, if the roof area or the section of that roof that's going to the down spout, because usually, we've got multiple downspouts around our roofs. If the section of the roof is 25 or 20 feet by 25 feet, this is going to be 500 square feet. 4% of that 500 square feet is a 20 square feet. Pardon me. Just 24% is just 20 square feet. So that's not very big. That's actually rather small. Again, 4% is the minimum, and we're going to go up to as large as 10% as the maximum. Sorry, I got kind of tongue-tied there. So the minimum size of our 500 square foot example is going to be 4%. That's going to be the 20 square feet, which is very small, very manageable. This is just a bit of space, but it can really hold a lot of water. Now, designing an installation. Let's have a closer look at this illustration. Rain gardens are going to be about 6 inches deep, as I've mentioned. However, if the soil is less porous, more clay-like, that rain garden can be more shallow. As I shared, 3 to 5 inches is fine. It's going to have a very gradual sloping edges that can move that soil in, but then a very flat bottom. It doesn't have to be exactly flat, but just, eyeball it. Again, rain gardens are not built like a pond, okay? So that is absolutely not what we're building here. It's just going to be very shallow. We're also going to avoid building rain gardens over utilities like gas lines or electrical lines. And then again, we will check how fast that area of the soil is going to drain with the technique I shared before. Depending on the type of soil, this will also dictate the size of your rain garden. In some cases where the soil might drain a little bit more slowly, you might want to consider making the rain garden wider, or you can consider making multiple rain gardens around each downspout or anywhere where there is water flowing. So it doesn't just have to be one garden. It can be multiple small gardens. And then once you have your location and idea of depth, you'll dig out that area, dig out that soil. You can use that soil on the edges to berm the edges, or you can use it in other areas of the garden. Then we're going to loosen about 12 inches of the soil at the bottom with a fork or a shovel. I prefer using a fork. It's much easier in my opinion. And then we're going to mix in about 3 inches of compost to incorporate that compost into the top 4 to 6 inches of that soil we've just loosened. We're going to then consider adding rocks either around the entire rim of the rain garden, but in the least at the point of entry where that water is going to be coming into our rain garden. So we want to consider, plants for our rain garden. We're going to, it would be best to have the rain garden placed in a position that is very sunny. Full sun is best, but we can also, part shade would be fine as well. But the sunnier, the better. Okay, we really want to take advantage of the sun, especially during the winter months when we've got shorter daylight hours. We're going to choose native flowering perennials, clump grasses and other shrubs that would be suitable for the rain garden environment. California natives are the best because they can adapt to our climate and support our local habitat. So picking out the plants, this is the fun part. This is where we get to give ourselves permission to buy beautiful California native plants like yarrow, Pacific Coast irises, spread those California poppy seeds about. And there are so many others that are ideal choices because not only are they beautiful, but they support our pollinators, as I've shared, our native bees, other important beneficial insects that help keep the balance in our gardens. When we choose California native plants, they're going to thrive in these rain gardens. We want to choose the ones that will thrive during winter wet season, as well as the long California summer dry season. Those are the plants we're going to choose, and those are the plants that are going to thrive in these environments. And then finally, maintaining our rain garden. Maintenance is definitely something we want to consider. The 2 takeaways with maintenance is that you want to keep the rain garden working, and you also want to keep it looking good. So number 1, something that happens when the rains come, so do the weeds. So we will want to remove those weeds at first sight. As soon as we can walk on that soil, when the soil is dried out enough that we can get out there and walk on the soil, we never want to work or walk on soil that's been saturated because it can impact compact that soil. But once we can get out there, we actually want to get out there and hand pull those weeds or dig them out at first sight. We want to avoid using any herbicides that can kill other desirable plants. Also understanding that many herbicides can leach into the waterways, which is something we want to avoid. Something else I can share is that many of the herbicides are just top kills, just killing the top part of that plant or the weed, and not actually killing the roots, but actually making those roots stronger, helping them grow deeper, which is just going to grow a stronger weed, which will then be even more difficult to remove. So get out there and remove those weeds while they're young. We're also going to design our planting area with plants that when they are fully established are going to fill in, which will outcompete for the weeds. So we will have less weeds over time, but we want to keep in mind that we're not crowding the plants too much. We really want to give those plants room when at their mature size. We want to avoid doing excessive trimming or pruning because this actually will stress the plants out. And we also just want to avoid overall maintenance once everything is established and going well. We do want to irrigate these plants. We want to water them during the dry season as needed while they're becoming established. And if we happen to have a very dry winter, we want to remember to provide them with some irrigation. But once these plants are established, they're going to be able to handle the wet winter season and the summer dry season just fine. Mulch is going to be your friend. Mulch is key. We are going to cover that surface of the area and protect those root zones with about 2 to 3 inches of mulch, being mindful that we're not putting mulch around the crown of the plants or covering any stems of the plants. Okay, mulch is really going to protect that soil and help those plants thrive. After a rain event, we want to groom any plants where mulch may have built up around the crowns, or we want to replace any mulch that has been washed away. Okay, so those are some things to consider. Or if any debris or litter has accumulated around the base of the plants, we want to clean those out. We want to repair any areas that have eroded after a rain event. We want to make sure there is no standing water after 3 days. If that's the case, we're going to have to adjust it. So anyway, I love having rain gardens. I love watching them work. I love seeing how amazingly effective they are. So I hope that this has inspired you to install a few rain gardens on your property. So next we have Charlotte that's going to share more about keeping water on site.
Thank you, Suzanne. I love those beautiful rain gardens as well. All right, we have a couple of slides left. Our final topic today, suggestion for reducing runoff on our properties and reducing flooding, is to focus on increasing pervious or permeable surfaces. So these are, when we're thinking about our landscaping, we're also going to think about our hardscaping around our home. So that's the driveway, patios, walkways. Let's think about what we are using for those hardscaped areas. Concrete, mortared flagstone, brick with mortar are impervious, and they prevent water from soaking through into the ground, and they will contribute to runoff and flooding. So if we are redoing our yards, or have a new project, let's consider adding pervious surfaces. And there are a lot of options for that. There's pervious pavement, so it looks just like asphalt or pavement, but it is pervious. There's gravel pavers and other materials. We really want that water, any water that hits the surface, either soil, mulch, hardscaping on our property, to be able to enter and go down into that groundwater. Again, there's a lot of types of permeable materials. Asphalt you can get special permeable asphalt, pervious concrete, interlocking pavers, grid pavement, gravel, pavement strips. I've seen some cool driveways that will have gravel, but like 2, impervious strips for the cars to go on. So, just like shrinking the impervious surfaces on your property is also really helpful as well. Something to consider, though, of course, is how you're using that area. If you're walking on it or it's a patio, you don't have to do too much engineering. It's pretty lightweight, so it's not going to take a lot of weight, so you don't have to do too much, consider too much. But if you're changing your driveway, you will want to consider the weight that's going to be on it, and you might need to talk to a contractor engineer to install it. A few more examples of simpler for walkways could be gravel, decomposed granite, pavers, and bricks will create a clean surface, but also allows water to infiltrate so that the plants can access it and it can filter down into the groundwater. And again, you're going to have to understand how you're using the surface. This picture shows a driveway that was made out of pervious concrete, so it was poured in place. But it's going to be, it has layers underneath that will support the weight of a car or a truck. So consider the type of material for what application you're going to do it, you're going to use it for. It may need a permit, and I would consider for larger jobs, especially driveways, consider hiring a contractor.
And we created a helpful resource page that Sloat will post if you and I understand some of you, it was emailed out to most of you prior, but Charlotte and I just really wanted you to be aware of these top 3. So in regards to the topics we spoke about today and all the resources, Contra Costa Clean Water Program, the Marin County Stormwater Pollution Prevention Program, and the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission all have amazing resources on their websites for rain gardens, rainwater harvesting, rain catchment and management, and so forth. So in addition, as I mentioned before, the Urban Farmer is our go-to. They're also going to be able to provide you with a lot of resources. So you are in a pretty good place to get started by keeping water on site. And then lastly, for our pest management resources, we have our Water Our World. Please visit ourwaterourworld.org to get information on some building healthy gardens and other pest management topics, as well as the University of California statewide IPM program, which is this wealth of information, an amazing database just loaded with all lots of information for you with your pest management needs, pest identification. I like to go to bugguide.net. And then for pesticide information, I like the National Pesticide Information Center. Those are also on the resource page. So with that, we'd like to thank you for joining us. We really appreciate all of your amazing questions. There's still more that I didn't get to in the Q&A. But boy, we really appreciate you joining us on this rainy day. And just be safe out there. We're going to stay here to answer your questions, but if you have to leave, please be safe. And yeah, enjoy the rain.
Thank you so much. Gosh, a lot of information there. And I noticed that many of the questions were answered already. There are a few that are pretty interesting. One, can you combine a rainwater catchment system with a gray water system? Gray water being generally from your shower or clothes washing machine. Do you know whether that can be combined so that you can store the gray water?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and thank you for asking it. Gray water systems, which we did not get into, are intended to be immediately used in the landscape. Okay, you can decide if that water is going to go into the sewer system, or with the diverter valve, you can then direct it out and use it in the garden. Gray water is not intended to be stored at all. Rainwater catchment systems are designed to capture and hold that water to be used immediately or to be stored over a period of time with the intention of using during the dry season.
Let me just answer one person's question here, which is where can I find the emailed information on the Sloat website? Once again, it's sloatgardens.com. Go to the Learn tab and then the webinars, and you'll find the materials for a given webinar there. And also you can find the recordings of the past webinars. And I'll repeat again that this one will be available, the recording will be available on Tuesday at that website and at the Sloat Garden YouTube channel. Let's see, any others here that rebates are available for many of these suggestions, but you have to go to the website of your local water agency generally to see what rebates are available. I imagine that your urban farmer store will know since they work with that sort of thing every day, but I personally don't know the answer to the question. Can you use rainwater to water your greenhouse produce? Now that's an interesting one. So you've got a greenhouse, you're growing lettuces in your greenhouse. Is it okay to use the rainwater to water that sort of thing?
Yeah, I would say for the most part, yeah. There are some, I did read something somewhere that was a little hesitant about using it on veggies, but yes, I would say go for it. Rainwater is nice, clean water, perfect for using for watering any kind of plants and produce as well.
I heard that rainwater, especially if you've got smaller, like a 50-gallon barrel, if that's all you can capture, if that's all the space you have, and if you are growing seedlings, it's the best way to water the seedlings is because of all the natural minerals in the rainwater. So that was, since where I live, there's only one small barrel. I really want more, but I focus that water on my seedlings and all my starts.
I think in general, there's not a lot of pollution coming off of our roof. The first flush of rainwater may have a lot of pollen and other material in it that might clog things up a little bit, but I don't think it's going to have anything dangerous in it unless you have overhanging trees and you've been doing a lot of spraying of the trees or something like that.
Oh, that's a good point.
But otherwise, I can't really think of a way that you'd have things that are dangerous coming off of your roof. Let's see, anything else here?
There is a question about catching rainwater without gutters and fog water catching.
Oh, I love that.
I wish I knew more about fog water catching because I get a lot of fog in my neighborhood. But do any of you know about fog water catching?
So fog water catching is popular in some coastal areas that are very rural and unincorporated. And there is someone that lives in Bernal Heights, at least years ago when I first was reading about it, who created this little fog water catchment system outside of his window and was able to capture enough water to brew a cup of coffee every day. And essentially it is a horizontal piece of, let's say, fabric, and then the fog, the condensation accumulates and gathers and then drips off, and it gets funneled to a catchment system. It's really cool.
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit of information about fog catchment on the internet. It takes a little searching, but generally speaking, it's fabric with essentially the equivalent of a rain gutter down below it that the water flows into. And I don't know that there are commercially available systems that you can buy, but there are lots of examples if you're a handy person and want to experiment a little bit. That's a great idea.
I know, it's fun.
Well, thank you so much, Suzanne and Charlotte. This was terrific. We got a lot of a good response here. More people were signed up than I thought. Which
yeah.
And
double. Charlotte's going to teach her soils class or compost class in a couple of weeks, which should not be missed. You will learn so much more than you'd ever thought you could learn. And Charlotte is such just a delight it's very inspiring to listen to Charlotte talk about soils and compost. So that is something definitely not to be missed.
I don't think I'm hosting that, but I'm planning to tune in. So
awesome. Thank you, Dan.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We will end the session now and hope to see all of you out there in Zoom land at our next presentation. Bye now.
Thank you.